Part 15. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 141. I don't know how long it took, but Lin took a deep breath, and the purple light in his eyes slowly weakened. Thank you. Lin An rubbed his temples tiredly and said, there may be something wrong with me, but it's not a big problem. I will adjust my mentality well, as long as... And in the next moment, he had not finished speaking. Suddenly, an extremely majestic and forbidding aura came from the distance, and that aura enveloped him in an instant. Lin An raised his head suddenly, and the purple light in his eyes suddenly became brighter. He pulled Banmen behind him, looked at the sky indifferently, and said, "Who is it? Come out and meet him." The swarms of insects in the sky became restless. And at the next moment, everyone raised their heads and looked to the north of Jiangdu. Above the sky, an old man with white hair and white beard was seen walking in the void step by step, walking towards their direction. Obviously he was walking very slowly, but it seemed as if every step he took made him cross the boundless space. In just a few breaths, he reached the sky above the stadium. The patriarch of the Gongsun family. Gongsun Che, Kang Ming and others' expressions suddenly changed, and they subconsciously took a step back. Lin An's eyes slowly narrowed. This kind of breath. He is a Dharma god, a world-class Dharma god on the same level as Chen Daoming. There is only one world-class Dharma god in Jiangdu. That person is Gongsun Che. It was also the real driving force behind the attack on him and Ban Meng this time. Everyone held their breath and looked at Gongsun Che in the sky tremblingly. He and Lin An looked at each other across the void, and the surrounding atmosphere instantly turned cold to the extreme. Kang Ming and the others looked at the scene tremblingly, and they could even clearly feel the cold sweat on their backs. Don't tell me. Will this world-class magic god also take action against Lin An and Ban Meng? No one spoke. The two faced each other across the void, their eyes filled with indifference. A fierce murderous intention slowly wandered around. I don't know how long it took, but Gongsun Che, who was standing in the sky, slowly landed on the ground, bent down in the direction of Ban Meng and Lin An, bowed slightly, and said, Gongsun Che, the patriarch of the Gongsun family in Jiangdu, met Miss Ban Men and Venerable Lin An. The Gongsun family has been guarding Jiangdu for more than 10 years. The country has always been peaceful and the people are safe. I never thought that the two of them would encounter such ridiculous things in Jiangdu. Our Gongsun family, there is an unshirkable responsibility for this. He said in a low voice, don't worry, you two, similar things will not happen again in the future. The Gongsun family will thoroughly find out their details and give an explanation to Miss Ban Meng and Lord Lin En. As soon as these words came out, everyone around him trembled. Lin En narrowed his eyes and said, Mr. Gongsun, if something like this happens in your Jiangdu, as the world's Dharma god, you should be able to sense it immediately. I wonder what Mr. Gongsun is busy with. Gongsun Che said in a low voice, to tell you the truth, old man, I am very old. I have been practicing in seclusion in the past few months. In order not to be disturbed by trivial matters from the outside world, I have blocked my senses of the outside world. I never thought about it, but it almost happened. Big mistake. Lin An narrowed his eyes and said with a faint smile, I see, Mr. Gongsun came to pay you a favor. I almost suspected before that the general who wanted to kill me and Ban Meng was a member of your Gongsun family. But now it seems that I was worrying too much. A moment. The surrounding atmosphere once again solidified to freezing point. Kang Ming and others raised their hearts to their throats. They looked at Lin An and Gongsun Che tremblingly and swallowed subconsciously. Gongsun Che slowly raised his lowered head and looked directly into Lin An's eyes indifferently. The smile on Lin An's face did not diminish, but the purple light in her eyes became even worse. After a long time, Gongsun Che bowed and said in a low voice, the Gongsun family has always regarded the Chen family as the leader and would never dare to do such a treasonous thing. Lord Lin En, please rest assured that I will definitely get to the bottom of this matter and bring it to your attention. An explanation from Miss Ban Men. Lin En smiled lightly and said, then there is Mr. Lao Gongsun. Gongsun Che slowly raised his head, waved his hand suddenly, and said slowly, come here, immediately escort Lord Lin En and Miss Ban Meng back to the hotel to rest. If anything happens to Lord Lin En and Miss Ban Meng, I will take it as your responsibility. The next moment, on the street, one after another strong men above the Grand Master level rushed over. They knelt down on one knee and said in a low voice, yes, head of the family. Lin En waved his hand and said calmly, no need to bother, we can go back by ourselves, but we will have to trouble Mr. Gongsun to deal with the aftermath here. Gongsun Che said in a low voice, yes, Venerable Lin En. Under everyone's gaze, Lin En grabbed Ban Meng's wrist and walked heavily through the crowd toward the street. The sky full of insect swarms still enveloped the entire Jiangdu, scarlet as blood. Gongsun Che stood in this desolate battlefield, looking ahead expressionlessly. He stood for a long time without saying a word. Master, a general said solemnly with his eyes twinkling. Should we just let them go? Gongsun Che said calmly, otherwise. Do you want me to suppress them both in front of the whole world? The town general stepped back and said in a low voice, my subordinate made a mistake and asked the head of the family to punish him. Gongsun Che slowly turned his head and looked in the direction where Lin En and Ban Meng left, and looked deeply. The largest hotel in Jiangdu. Ban Meng has been living here since she came to Jiangdu. In the hotel room, Ban Meng sat on the sofa, hugged her slender arms, looked at Lin En leaning against the wall with a serious expression, and said deeply. Lin En, you told me before that the Gongsun family is the mastermind behind the series of events that broke out against you and me this time. Lin En said lightly, even if I didn't get the news, it can be inferred from the incident against you that a world-class god of law waited until we killed the town commander before appearing. Isn't this obvious? Ban Meng took a deep breath and said, what should we do now? Lin En walked to her side and looked at her deeply. Leaning on the sofa, he touched his forehead, closed his eyes, and said, call your father. The situation is now more dangerous than I thought. A world-class god of law is in Jiangdu. If he really wants to kill us, we can't escape at all. Ban Meng turned his head and looked at Lin En's face with worry, and said, why don't we leave Jiangdu now? Lin En smiled lightly and said, he, let's not talk about whether they will let us leave easily. I'm afraid that as soon as we leave Jiangdu, the world-class god of law will immediately take action to suppress us. You should understand what I mean. Ban Meng's heart sank. That's right, in Jiangdu, he would never dare to take action against them in public, because once it was discovered that their death was related to the Gongsun family, with his father's character, the entire Gongsun family would be destroyed. That Gongsun Che would never do such a stupid thing. But it was different outside Jiangdu. Because leaving Jiangdu, they would no longer have any relationship with their Gongsun family. There would be no evidence, and they could explain it however they wanted. Lin En narrowed his eyes and said, do you know why I openly ridiculed him in front of so many people just now? I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 142. Ban Meng was startled and turned his head to look deeply at Lin En. Obviously, Lin En's behavior just now was definitely not out of emotional venting. He is an extremely rational person, and everything he does obviously has his intentions. Lin En said deeply, after clarifying the matter, I place this huge responsibility on the Gongsun family. In other words, if we encounter anything similar again, if he didn't come out to protect us too at the first time, no matter what the outcome, his Gongsun family would bear this unshirkable responsibility. Ban Men stared blankly at the man next to him. She understood. During the verbal exchange with Gongsun Che just now, he quietly set up a bureau for the Gongsun family. If something similar to what happened before happens again, it will be like letting everyone in the world know that the Gongsun family did not protect them properly. If anything happens to the two of them, the Gongsun family will not be able to escape its responsibility. And if this kind of thing really happens again, Gongsun Che must rush to resolve it as soon as possible. If not, it will also give the above a reason to hold him accountable. In any case, from now on, whenever something happens to the two of them in Jiangdu, the Gongsun family will be held responsible. Gongsun Che also definitely knows this. Lin En turned this most dangerous place into the safest place for them now. He forced Gongsun Che, the mastermind who wanted to kill them most, to become their protector. Banmen took a deep breath, looked at Lin En and said, "Lin, I really don't understand you anymore. You are such a scary guy." Lin En said deeply, "At least in the short term, we will be safe, but Gongsun Che will definitely find ways to kill us, and the best way." Banmen said solemnly, "What is it?" Lin En narrowed his eyes and said, "He needs to have a sufficient excuse to allow him, a world-class magic god, to leave Jiangdu during this period. As long as he leaves, it will be difficult for us to, even if anything happens in Jiangdu, put the blame on him. Similarly, if we encounter any danger, he will have reasons and excuses not to show up immediately." Ban Meng felt that her breathing was a little heavy. She clenched her hands and asked, "What do you think he will do?" Lin En said deeply, "If I were him, what he wants to receive most right now is probably your father's call." Ban Meng was startled and said, "My father's phone number?" Jiangdu, in the manor of the Gongsun family. Among the pavilions of the manor, the atmosphere at this moment was so solemn that it seemed that even water could freeze. Ling Tian said deeply, "Mr. Gongsun, it seems that you have already fought against that Lin En." Gongsun Che put his hands behind his back, looked at the pond expressionlessly, and said, "I really never expected that he is not only powerful, but even the city is so scary. I just met him and was defeated by him. He just used a few words to describe me as a person. The world-class Dharma god is in an extremely embarrassing situation." Ling Tian said deeply, "Oh, I would like to hear the details." Gongsun Che said indifferently, "Do you think I still have a chance to take action against them? From now on, whenever they encounter any danger in our Jiangdu, and I don't arrive at the first time, then my Gongsun Che will the family must face the Chen family's punishment. I was the one who wanted to kill them, but now I have to protect them." As soon as that Lin En said those words, I had already fallen into his control. This kid used a conspiracy to plot against me. Ling Tian's brows slowly darkened. After the defeat of that general, the Gongsun family had actually fallen into a passive position. If Gongsun Che had not come forward to explain at that time, then the Chen family would have pointed the finger at the Gongsun family. But if you come forward, you will have a high chance of falling into the current situation. And that Lin En obviously saw this and forced his Gongsun family to make this promise. Ling Tian said solemnly, "Then what should we do now? Are we really unable to kill them?" Gongsun Che said indifferently, "The only way to break this situation now is for me to leave Jiangdu, but the initiative is no longer with me, because if I leave at this juncture for any reason, I will be blamed. In the end, even if someone can kill both of them, our Gongsun family will not be able to escape the blame." Ling Tian said solemnly, "What good idea do you have?" Gongsun Che said indifferently, "I'm waiting for a call." Ling Tian suddenly narrowed his eyes and said, "Who?" Gongsun Che took a deep breath, looked ahead indifferently, and said, "Chen Daoming. It depends on whether he gives me this opportunity. He will probably learn about the news that his daughter was almost assassinated in Jiangdu soon. Based on his prejudice against me, he will definitely mobilize me, a world-class magic god, and then send his cronies came to Jiangdu to protect Banmen and Lin En, because he is worried about me being here. This is the only reason why I have the chance to leave Jiangdu. Ling Tian's eyes flashed with dark light, and he said. And the gap between you leaving and the arrival of Chen Daoming's cronies is the best opportunity to kill them, right? Gong Sun Che said indifferently, yes, it is also the only chance. Both men fell into silence. I don't know how long it took, but suddenly, the phone on the table rang. The two turned their heads to look at the phone at the same time, and the expressions on their faces gradually darkened. Jiangdu, Hotel. Ban Men held the phone, took a deep breath, turned his head and looked at Lin En, who was leaning on the sofa, and said. Lin En, I have told my father everything. He will immediately send 5 top town generals to Jiangdu. Lin En supported his temple with his hand and said deeply. How long will it take? Ban Men said solemnly, 1 day, if it's fast, half a day. Lin En narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Ban Men, never think things are so simple. Do you still remember that I was monitored by the winner of Zhuzhu domain in Jianghai City a few months ago? Ban Men hesitated and said, I remember that you killed one of their great masters, and Yingjia has been eliminated by my father. Suddenly, she seemed to remember something, her face changed slightly, and she said, could it be? Lin En said lightly, yes, a family that can't even be ranked in your Shendu dared to monitor me and even kill me when they knew that I was appointed as a heavenly master by your father. You should know that this matter is definitely not that simple. Ban Meng's face slowly turned pale. Are you saying that there is a hidden master behind that incident? Lin En said deeply, yes, and what happened in Jianghai City a few months ago and what happened to us in Jiangdu today seem to have nothing to do with each other, but in fact, they are inextricably linked. I am afraid that whether it is the Gongsun family or Yingjia, they are just a gun used by the real mastermind to contain us. Ban Meng felt her heart fall. She faintly felt that there was an extremely dark vortex slowly spinning around them, slowly involving them bit by bit. She quickly asked, but, what is the reason for them to do this? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 143. Lin En said indifferently, don't you understand yet? Your Chen family is now a dominant family in the 9 provinces, covering the sky with one hand. And after I became a heaven-level venerable of your Chen family, in their eyes, the Chen family and I are like people on the same warship. Then think about it carefully. You, who are no longer bound by Dao's Hang, and I, who have just become famous because of the insect swarm incident, and the talents from all over the world you are gathering now, what kind of signal will this be in their eyes? Ban Men clenched his fists, took a deep breath and said, I understand, I finally understand. Family games, interest games, this world is really not as simple as she imagined. The Kyushu territory is not monolithic at all, because there is no emotion between families in the face of interests. Lin En smiled lightly and said, if I were them, I would never sit back and watch the expansion of your Chen family. I would also try every means to block you, and kill you, or kill me, which would be detrimental to the future of the Chen family. It's a huge loss that is irreparable. The cake is only so big. If the Chen family loses power, they can get an extra share. Ha, it's really sad. Ban Meng looked at his hands worriedly. She realized that she was really too young. If Lin hadn't pointed it out, she might still not be able to see through the interest disputes and huge darkness hidden behind it. If this is really the case, then everything is already clear. The only one who doesn't want to see the Chen family dominate is. Ban Men said in a low voice, the other 3 major families in our Zhuzhu region. Lin En held his temples and said deeply, that's why I tell you that things will never be that simple. The helpers sent by your father will definitely be blocked by them openly or covertly. If they can come to Jiangdu within a week, I'm afraid they will all. It's a bit difficult. Ban Meng only felt pain in his brain one after another. He simply couldn't imagine how Lin En came up with all of this, the game behind the scenes, the layers of killings, and they were in it, and she was already blank on how the future would go. Could it be said that this is a problem that must be faced when standing in front of the stage? If it weren't for Lin En, he didn't know how he would have died. Ban Men took a deep breath and looked at Lin En. She suddenly remembered something and said, "Then, can we wait until my father sends some help and then, let Gong Sun Che leave?" Lin En laughed dumbly and said, "Ban Meng, this is the best situation. If it is really like that, it will be equivalent to forcing Gong Sun Che to make the final decision, to kill us or not to kill us. I have put him in a position where it is difficult for him to do something to us, but that doesn't mean he really can't do something to us. Because if he really kills us secretly and finds a scapegoat to take the blame, although the interests of the Gong Sun family will be harmed, it is far from being able to be exterminated by your father." Ban Men said quickly, "If that's the case, then why doesn't he risk his own interests to attack us?" Lin En laughed, touched her head and said, "Because he is Gong Sun Che." Ban Meng was startled, not understanding what Lin En meant. Lin En held her temples and said deeply, "I have learned about their Gong Sun family. That family is now in decline. Gong Sun Che has been addicted to the pain of losing his son all year round. For a lonely old man like him, the interests of the family are better than those of heaven. As long as it is not a last resort, he will never allow the family's interests to be harmed. Because if the interests of the Gong Sun family suffer another huge loss, then there will no longer be a possibility for them to rise, so Gong Sun Che will try his best to ensure that the interests of his family do not suffer any risks. This is why he will not act recklessly, the reason for attacking us." Ban Men frowned, feeling his head hurt, and said, "So?" Lin En said deeply, "And this is the reason why he is waiting for your father's call, because I believe he also knows very well that after he leaves, the cronies sent by your father will definitely be stopped. In this way, he will create something in Jiangdu. There is a gap period. During this gap period, even if anything happens, we can't let him bear this responsibility, so this is the best solution for him." Half Dream was stunned. She was speechless for a moment and could no longer speak. Lin En tapped the coffee table gently and said deeply, "So, once your father makes the decision you just mentioned, it will interrupt the best path for him. For him, if he kills us secretly, the interests of the Gong Sun family will inevitably suffer huge losses. If he doesn't kill us, I'm afraid he will offend the mastermind behind him. Under the dilemma, the same loss, coupled with the addition of Gong Sun, the family hates your father, which decision do you think he will make?" Ban Meng said blankly, "He will be forced to take risks." Lin En nodded, squinted his eyes, and said, "Yes, so your father's phone call is very important. He believes that his plan will be able to kill us during the gap, so he will not take risks. But equally, for us, this is the best way." Lin En stood up expressionlessly and said calmly, "If we want to leave, they can't stop us. If we fight with them, we won't necessarily lose. And when it comes to fighting, I, Lin, have never been afraid of anyone." Ban Meng stared blankly at Lin En's back. "It's hard to describe in words. Is he really only in his 20s? But why did he suddenly feel that he seemed to have been immersed in this dark struggle for many years? I originally thought that I had almost seen through him, but now it seems that I am afraid that what I have seen is only the tip of his iceberg. Under the calm sea level, I am afraid that his hidden talents will be more and more terrifying." Lin En shook his head, turned around and said, "After Gong Sun Che leaves, they may attack us at any time. To be on the safe side, it's best for us to stay closer so that we can take care of them." Ban Men immediately stood up, nodded seriously, and said, "Well, it's best for us to live together. This room is very big and can fit the two of us." Lin En froze and said, "I mean, I'll get a room next door. Ban Meng quickly blocked the door, held the door handle, raised her purple eyes and looked at him solemnly, saying, "It's too dangerous and I don't think it's prudent enough." Lin En raised his eyebrows and said, "Get out of the way." Ban Meng solemnly said, "No." So the two people stood there confronting each other for this inexplicable reason for a long time, their eyes constantly clashing in the air. After a long time, Lin En turned his head, sat down on the sofa, hugged his shoulders, and said expressionlessly, "As you like." In the half-dream eyes, the deep expression slowly melted away and became exceptionally soft. Anyone who looked at that soft gaze could not help but feel dazed. It was clear and extremely gentle. "What do you want to eat?" "I'll cook it for you," she asked softly. Lin En took a deep breath and said, "Let's have a bowl of noodles." I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 144. In the evening, Lin En sat at the dining table, holding chopsticks and looking at the steaming clear soup noodles brought by Ban Meng, eating voraciously. He was indeed very hungry. He had taken the train all the way to Jiangdu in the morning and had experienced many battles of varying sizes. He had not eaten anything and his energy was already running out. Lin En did not pretend to be serious. Just like at home, he picked up the noodles and ate them without any etiquette. Ban Meng sat opposite him, supporting her chin with both hands and watching him wolfing down his food. The light in her eyes was particularly gentle, and even unconsciously, a clear smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. It seemed that even she herself did not know that her smile in these few hours was equivalent to the smile in the past 10 years. Gulp. Gulp. Lin En picked up the bowl and drank the last of the soup, raised his head and asked, "Anything else?" Ban Meng immediately stood up and took the bowl, saying, "There's more, don't move, just sit there, I'll serve you, don't move." Under Lin En's strange gaze, Ban Meng quickly took the bowl, took a brisk step, and trotted all the way to the kitchen. Soon, another bowl of steaming noodles was placed in front of Lin En. Ban Meng still sat opposite him as before, propped up her chin, opened her purple eyes, and looked at him. Lin En picked up the chopsticks and was slightly startled. Because there were 2 poached eggs on the noodles. This reminded him of the 2 years when his sister pushed him in a wheelchair and prepared this bowl of steaming clear soup noodles with eggs every night. She also sat opposite him like Ban Meng now, watching him finish all the noodles seriously. Lin En unconsciously raised his head, looked at her, and said, "Aren't you going to eat?" "I've eaten," Ban Meng said softly. In his mind, the same words his sister had said to him in the past 2 years rang at the same time, with the same tone, and the same eyes. For a moment, Lin En suddenly felt that there was a strange feeling in his heart. But it was hard to figure out where it was. It just felt very safe and warm, which made people relax. This feeling was the first time he felt it in a place other than home. Lin En, who had always looked at everything in the outside world with the greatest malice and distrust of the whole world, suddenly felt at this time. If this feeling continued, it would not be bad. In this inexplicable silence, Lin En finished the second bowl of noodles under the gentle gaze of Ban Meng. At night, the cold moon was hanging high. Under the soft big bed, Lin En was lying on the floor, with a thin gauze curtain between the two of them. The moonlight shone in from the window, dyeing the whole room with a thin layer of silver frost. Lin En couldn't sleep because he felt it was weird. This was the first time he slept in the same room with a girl other than his sister. "Lin En, are you asleep?" a half-dream voice came from the other side of the gauze. Lin En rested his head on his arm and said calmly, "No." There was a rustling sound from the bed, and a hazy figure could be seen sitting up from the bed. In the dark moon, the hazy figure slowly got out of bed. She was wearing pajamas, and her long hair fell behind her like a waterfall. She held a pillow in her arms and carefully lifted the thin gauze curtain. Then, she lay sideways next to Lin En, holding the pillow in her arms, and curled up next to him. For a moment, some indescribable feeling slowly wandered in this room. None of them spoke, and in the faint, only the faint breath of the two of them could be heard. Lin En leaned on his shoulder, looked at the ceiling calmly, and said, "Do you like to climb into a man's bed so much?" Ban Meng curled up beside him, looking at the moonlight outside the window with purple eyes hazily, and said, "No, I just feel that sleeping like this will make me feel more at ease." Lin En said calmly, "Do you have someone to sleep with you like this at home?" Ban Meng nodded imperceptibly, her voice was as hazy as the moonlight. "Well, when I was a child, as long as I felt scared, I would go to my mother, lean against her, and listen to her breathing, so that I would feel at ease, and no longer have to worry about falling asleep and never waking up the next day." Lin En said calmly, "Where is your mother?" Ban Meng said softly, "She died. When she was 5 years old, she was killed by my father's enemies." Lin En moved slightly and said, "I'm sorry." Ban Meng shook his head gently, as if he closed his eyes to resist some impulse. "It's been so long, I've almost forgotten it. I just remember that after my mom left, my sister held me like this for a long time. I felt as safe as being with my mom when I was with her." Lin En fell into silence. He could vaguely feel Ban Meng's hand tightening his arm. "It's just that it hasn't been that long," Ban Meng said softly. "When I was 6 years old, the conflict between my sister and dad had accumulated to the point of bursting. My sister always thought it was my father's fault because of my mother's death. They kept arguing. Whenever they met, they would keep arguing. When they argued, I could only hide in the room, bury my head in the quilt and cry. I felt stupid." Lin En looked at the ceiling under the moonlight and listened to her voice quietly. Ban Meng whispered, "Later, my sister left. She didn't call me or write to me. She only told me that she was going to the south, very far south. She swore that she would never contact her family unless she felt that she had the ability to avenge her mother. Then she really didn't contact her family for many years." Lin En felt Ban Meng holding his hand and trembled slightly. Lin En took a deep breath, turned around and touched her head, and said, "Don't say it." Ban Meng curled up with the pillow, and there was a faint flow of water in her slightly opened eyes. "So, it's been a long time since I felt as at ease as I do now. Don't worry about not waking up the next day, or being killed suddenly, or thunder and rain, don't worry at all, just feel." She choked softly and said, "Why is it so difficult to find someone you can rely on?" Lin En reached out and hugged her back, hugged her slender and trembling body, closed his eyes, and said, "If everything can be done according to your heart, there won't be so many bumps in the world. Everyone is growing up, and so are you. When you grow up, you may find that it's not difficult to find such a person." Ban Meng slowly raised her head and looked at his cheek under the moonlight. Her purple eyes were flowing like water waves. She gently touched the tip of her nose to his neck, closed her eyes, and her voice was as hazy as the moonlight. "Well, it's not that hard. I've found it. Warm Ti. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 145. In the manner of the Gongsun family. The red sun is high. Gongsun Che stood in front of the gate of the manor, and hundreds of people from the entire Gongsun family came out to see him off. Gongsun Che said expressionlessly, "Okay, I will probably stay in the city for about a week this time. During my absence, you must take good care of the family and don't cause any trouble for me." "Yes, master." Everyone knelt down and worshipped. Gongsun Che turned his head and glanced at Ling Tian, who was not far away. Their eyes met in the air, and they both saw the deep meaning in each other's eyes. A few minutes later, inside a factory outside the city, Erickson walked into the factory with his dozens of subordinates, his hands behind his back. Ericsson has met Gongsun Chifa Shen. Your name is like thunder even though you are far away overseas. Ericsson nodded slightly, raised his head with a smile, squinted his eyes, and looked at Gongsun Che and Ling Tian in the factory. Gongsun Che was his employer. They had already had an online meeting last night, and he clearly knew the purpose of Gongsun Che's invitation to him this time. Lin. Yes, their target is Lin. Gongsun Che said deeply, the Defenders organization is the most powerful killer group in the world. Those who can join the Defenders are all the most powerful and notorious criminals in each country. Mr. Ericsson, I'm afraid you already know what kind of person you are facing this time. Ericsson smiled deeply and said, Lin, that strong man who wiped out millions of insect swarms and defeated a general yesterday, how could I not know him? His insect swarms are still in Jiangdu. It's hovering in the sky. Gongsun Che said calmly, in that case, I want to know, what method can Ericsson use to make Lin En and Ban Meng disappear without a trace without involving my Gongsun family? In other words. Gongsun Che's voice suddenly became violent and he said, why should I believe that a junior town general has the ability to kill that Lin En? The surrounding atmosphere instantly became solemn. Ericsson's men all narrowed their eyes, and murderous intent shot out from their eyes one after another. But Ericsson still had a smile on his face. He pointed to his head and said slowly, in my opinion, killing is an art, and the general you sent yesterday was stupid, funny, and even couldn't help but want to make people laugh. He has such strong strength, but he doesn't have the brain to match it. The defeat is also reasonable. Gongsun Che narrowed his eyes and said, oh. Ericsson put his hands behind his back and said with a smile, Mr. Gongsun, do you know what I am called? Gongsun Che said indifferently, the chess player, the manipulator hidden in the darkness. Eric shook his finger and smiled, it's very close, but I still prefer another title given to me by others. He said slowly, Puppet Master. In an instant, the dozens of great masters and two generals of the Gongsun family standing behind Gongsun Che suddenly had a flash of red light in their eyes. The next moment, they pulled out the sharp swords from their waists and instantly surrounded Gongsun Che and Ling Tian in the center at an unimaginable speed. Ling Tian's expression changed and he shouted, what are you doing? Gongsun Che narrowed his eyes and said, it seems that I know Mr. Ericsson's ability. For you are indeed worthy of being proud of. Ericsson put one hand on his chest, bowed deeply to Gongsun Che in an aristocratic manner, and said with a smile, Puppet Master Ericsson, I met Mr. Gongsun again. Ling Tian's expression changed slightly. He looked at the dozens of men in the Gongsun family who instantly turned against each other, and he had already faintly noticed something fishy. They are controlled. But when? Why didn't I notice anything before? And among them are not only the Grand Master, but also two generals. Even the two town generals were unknowingly controlled by that person. What kind of weird ability was this? Ericsson smiled deeply and said, my life will has given me the ability to control people's hearts. This method of controlling a person's actions is just the simplest application. I can easily sneak into anyone's heart, as long as you have a little bit of weakness and a little bit of fear in your heart, I can take advantage of it. Gongsun Che narrowed his eyes and said, what about the triggering medium? When you controlled my people, I didn't feel any fluctuations. Ericsson looked at him deeply and said, when you stare into the abyss is also staring at you, Mr. Gongsun. Gongsun Che frowned and immediately avoided his gaze, but then he laughed. I really never expected that there would be such a weird ability in this world. As long as there is eye contact, you can easily sneak into a person's heart. Such a method is really hard to guard against. But obviously, Ericsson's methods are definitely more than that. What he tells you is just what he wants you to know. Because Gongsun Che knew that he had another title. Chess player. Although this man is a junior general, his abilities already put him far above this rank. Gong Sun Che suddenly stopped smiling, narrowed his eyes and said, "Okay, Mr. Erickson, if you successfully complete this mission, I will give you everything you want. I want to see Lin's body in front of me." Erickson bowed with a smile, "As you wish." Hotel. Lin An sat cross-legged on the sofa, with waves of light dancing in her purple eyes. And in his palm, a dark life wheel was being constructed by him bit by bit. Magic wheel. This is the magic wheel representing devouring evolution that I just copied from that mid-level general. In an instant, Lin An's eyes fell on the magic wheel he had built. Mutation evolution, a life wheel formed by blending together. Lin studied it all morning. Although this life wheel was indeed so powerful that it had almost no upper limit, he soon discovered that this life wheel had a fatal flaw. That is, after devouring living things, the direction of evolution and mutation is completely uncontrollable. For example, if you fuse the genes of a wolf, you may grow sharp claws and fangs and become more powerful, but at the same time, you are also very likely to become as ferocious as a wolf, or even become a meat-eater. Beast. This wheel of fate has no ability to select the fused genes. Lin An narrowed his eyes and said, "But if this shortcoming can be corrected, then this life wheel will really be a bit scary. Every time it is swallowed, the best genes will be absorbed, their weaknesses will be discarded, their strengths will be retained, and they will continue to evolve towards perfection. If this is the case, once he is engraved in the insect swarm, his insect swarm will be truly unstoppable." Lin An thought to himself, with the experience of creating a swarm last time, it shouldn't be that difficult to adjust the structure of the law. It seems that it is necessary to study it carefully. He spent the whole afternoon transforming the structure of this life wheel. Amidst the failures again and again, the wheel of life is constantly developing in the most perfect direction. It wasn't until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon that Lin An made a mark in the wheel of life. The next moment, a dazzling purple light burst out from his eyes. Success. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 146. He looked at the black life wheel slowly lingering in his hand. After an afternoon of transformation, this life wheel finally gradually became perfect. Abandoning the biggest weakness of this life wheel, instead, its advantages are brought into full play. If such a life wheel appears in this world, it will definitely cause an uproar. Even among all the known life wheels, it has the qualification to be ranked in the top 3. Lin An said deeply, "As long as it is planted in the body of the insect swarm, my insect swarm will have the ability to evolve continuously. It is really exciting." He summoned a scarlet parasite casually, and then began to transform them. It didn't take long for Lin An to easily plant this life wheel in the body of the insect. Looking at the delicate insect body in his hand, Lin An smiled. As long as this insect body that has been transformed by himself is released into the insect swarm, it will continue to devour other insects and split into countless new individuals, and then replace the original insect swarm, so that this scarlet insect swarm will be completely transformed. Lin An came to the window, and with a light jump, he climbed up to the hundreds of floors of the building. Standing on the high rooftop, Lin An suddenly raised his head and said expressionlessly, "My swarm, come here." The next moment, countless scarlet swarms hidden in the sky turned into a rolling torrent and gathered above Lin An. They were cheering, they were jumping for joy, and they kept spinning around him like they were watching their father. Then, Lin An released the modified worm. Go! Lin An hugged his shoulders and smiled. "I remember there is a forest in the south of Jiangdu, where there are ferocious beasts lurking all year round. Do what you should do, and I will give you permission to devour and reproduce." The next moment, countless swarms of insects turned into a rolling stream and flew high into the sky. They circled the entire sky with great excitement, just like a group of people allowed by their father to do something that they have never been allowed to do. They were cheering. Lin An smiled slightly, jumped down from the tall building, and returned to the room lightly. The evolution of the Zerg takes some time, but after seeing them again, they will probably look at themselves with new eyes. Lin An, I have temporarily dealt with the matter at the conference. In the evening, after Ban Meng came back, he told Lin An what he had done during the day. The conference of the top 100 supernovas, which was interrupted by the raid yesterday, finally ended smoothly today. All day today, Lin An secretly asked the Zerg to protect Ban Meng to prevent any accidents. Lin An said deeply, Gongsun Che has left today, which means that starting from tomorrow, the Gongsun family will take action against us at any time. Ban Meng said worriedly, then how should we deal with it? Lin An said deeply, now we are in the light, they are in the dark. We don't know what means the Gongsun family will use to deal with us, but as long as they reveal the slightest clue, I can find a breakthrough. Everything will remain the same. The meeting will continue and we will do what we should do. What Lin An needs now is a reason to take action against the Gongsun family. And now, just wait. Ban Meng nodded, with some hesitation in her eyes, she suddenly said. I will arrange the meeting for the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have a day of free time. I think. She lowered her head and said, can you accompany me to the playground? Lin An raised her eyebrows and said, we don't have time to play now. Ban Meng said seriously, this may be able to lure them out, really? She clenched her hands and looked at Lin An hopefully. Lin An shook his head and said, okay, we can give it a try. Ban Meng showed a clear smile on his face and nodded seriously, yeah. At the same time, on the other side of Jiangdu, Kang Ming, carrying a giant sword, was walking indifferently on the road. The sun was setting. He had just attended that boring meeting and was about to go back to his residence. After seeing the scene of Lin An and Ban Meng killing the middle-level town general yesterday, his heart had already undergone subtle changes. The gap was like a natural moat. He originally thought that he was already one of the top geniuses in the Juzhu domain. Even if he couldn't rank first, he would definitely not be too bad. But after yesterday, he knew clearly that in front of those real geniuses, he was really nothing. He looked at his hands silently and said slowly, I am still young, I have more time to grow and more opportunities than him. Sooner or later, I will defeat him head-on. Lin An. He raised his head suddenly, and his eyes flashed with a light of unwillingness to admit defeat. But at this moment, a ghostly voice came from the alley next to him. Oh? Do you think so too? Kang Ming turned his head suddenly, pulled out the black giant blade behind him in an instant, and shouted at the dark alley. Who is it? Get out of here. The surrounding aura suddenly became extremely strange. Kang Ming looked at the alley solemnly, because he found that he did not feel the slightest breath there. The next moment, bursts of low laughter came from the alley. Amidst the heavy footsteps, a man in black robe slowly walked out of the darkness, with a smile on his face and his eyes like a ghost, faintly glowing blood red. At this moment, behind him were two people who were very familiar to Kang Ming. Dayi, Hongling. Kang Ming suddenly frowned. I saw Daoyi in a white robe and Hongling with long hair shawl slowly walking out. The expressions on their faces were very strange, and what was even more noticeable was their eyes, which were empty, indifferent, and exuding the slightest trace of wisps of red light. Kang Ming immediately realized something was wrong, because this man had appeared in front of him, and he still didn't feel any aura emanating from him. Kang Ming suddenly gritted his teeth and said, Who are you? What did you do to them? Daoyi and Hongling were in a very strange state. The man looked at Kang Ming with a smile and said, My name is Erickson, and I am a puppeteer. As for what I did to them, He said softly, "You will know." For a moment, Kang Ming saw his eyes, and the moment he saw his eyes, the expression on his face slowly relaxed, and his eyes slowly became like a dark black pool, disappearing. All the light. There was a clang. The giant sword in his hand fell to the ground. Kang Ming slowly knelt on the ground and said hollowly, "It's the master." Erickson raised his head and looked at the sky with a smile and said, "Lin, I really can't wait." Throughout the city, one person after another raised their heads in vain, and at that moment, red lights flashed in their eyes. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 147. The next day. In the amusement park, Lin An squinted his eyes and walked step by step in the bustling crowd with Ban Meng holding his hand. The people here were not affected by the battle yesterday at all. They were still like normal people, laughing and enjoying the happy time that ordinary people should have. But the atmosphere here did not affect Lin An. His mind was always highly concentrated to prevent any possible crisis. But Ban Meng's state was surprisingly good. Today she even changed into a beautiful dress and had a clear and beautiful smile on her face. She was like an ordinary girl, holding her lover's hand and walking in the bustling crowd. At this time, Lin An's eyes moved slightly. I saw a tiny red bug slowly falling from the sky onto his palm. Lin An looked at the bug and squinted his eyes and said, "Have you completed the evolution of about 10 million? Very good." The bug brought him a comforting news. Just last night, his countless swarms of insects devoured all the thousands of ferocious beasts entrenched in the southern forest, and because of the large amount of nutrients supplied, the number of new swarms has also increased wildly to 10 million. Lin An felt the joyful signal from the insects, and said with a smile, "Very good, leave a part to continue devouring evolution, and let the rest of the swarms hide in Jiangdu. I need your help to monitor the entire Jiangdu." Lin An stretched out his hand, and the insect immediately flew up and disappeared into the sky. The combat effectiveness of the swarms that have completed the metamorphosis has obviously been qualitatively improved. Lin An plans to let the swarms spread throughout Jiangdu, so that no one in Jiangdu can escape his control and attention. And once his layout is completed, it will be easy for him to kill anyone he wants. Lin An. Ban Meng, who was holding Lin An's hand, turned his head, blinked at him, and then pointed to the ice cream shop not far away. Lin An was slightly startled, and then she came back to her senses and looked in the direction that Ban Meng pointed. Outside the ice cream shop, there were couples talking and laughing, close to each other. Looking at Ban Meng's hopeful eyes, Lin An said helplessly, "Do you want to eat?" Ban Meng nodded hopefully, her eyes full of expectation. Lin An shook her head and said, "I'll buy it for you, but only this time, understand?" Ban Meng nodded coquettishly and said, "Yeah, I understand." Lin An walked towards there helplessly. It seemed that after she confided in herself the night before, Ban Meng's personality gradually became lively, and now she is basically the same as a normal girl. But why do I feel that they are now like a couple shopping? There are obviously important things to do. Ban Meng looked at Lin An's back, and unconsciously, a touch of tenderness appeared on her face. It really came true. Just like those lovers, just like two normal close people, without any shackles and burdens, just being together so simply. This long-cherished wish has really come true. She wiped away the moisture that suddenly flashed in the corner of her eyes, and a cheerful smile appeared on her face. The brightness of that moment made everyone around her stunned. But at this moment, suddenly, Ban Meng felt a cold and playful gaze staring at her back. The smile on her face immediately withdrew, and she turned her head suddenly and looked there. Who is it? In an instant, in the crowd, she saw a man in a dark robe. He stood in the bustling crowd like a ghost, and smiled deeply at her. His eyes were like a pair of abysses, a pair of abysses that swallowed everything. Click. The bag in Ban Meng's hand fell to the ground. A ray of scarlet light slowly lit up in her purple pupils. She was struggling, she was resisting, but everything was in vain. Her eyes gradually became dark and empty. Lin En. A minute later, Lin En came over here with 2 cones. But Ban Meng was no longer in the crowd. Ban Meng, Lin En frowned suddenly, and a trace of uneasiness emerged in his heart. But the next moment, he saw Ban Meng's bag on the ground, but Ban Meng was gone. In an instant, Lin En narrowed his eyes, and purple rushed out of his eyes like a waterfall. He immediately realized what happened. Ban Meng would never play such a joke on him, especially at this time. And the next moment, his cell phone rang. Lin En immediately answered the phone expressionlessly, and a man's teasing voice came from the other end of the phone. Lin En, I'm sorry to tell you that you... In an instant, Lin En raised his head suddenly, and the eyes that burst out from the eye of law instantly passed through a distance of thousands of meters and finally landed on a huge Ferris wheel. The next moment, Lin En soared into the sky, and in the horrified eyes of the people around him, he went to the Ferris wheel at a speed faster than the speed of sound. On the Ferris wheel, the face of a man in black holding a mobile phone suddenly changed. What's going on? How did he find me? And the next moment, Lin En rushed into the rotating Ferris wheel, and the glass and steel bars were shattered directly under his powerful impact. In the horrified eyes of the man, Lin En grabbed his collar, lifted him up, and pressed him heavily to the ground. He said solemnly, "Very good, now I will give you 3 seconds. If you don't tell me the whereabouts of Ban Meng, I will let you experience the ultimate pain in this world." The man looked at Lin En tremblingly. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. 3. He gritted his teeth and said in fear, "I tell you, if you dare to do something to me." 2. He looked at Lin En tremblingly, and his voice was trembling, because those eyes were full of murderous intent at this moment, so cold that they could even freeze a person's bone marrow. He trembled and said, "Then Chen Ban Meng." 1. The next moment, a shrill scream burst out from the Ferris wheel. The intense scream even made people doubt whether it was a sound that humans could make. It was a painful scream that could only be made when the pain was so extreme that even the soul was about to be crushed. Everyone in the amusement park raised their heads in fear and stared at the Ferris wheel. They had no idea what was going on there. "I'll tell you. I'll tell you." The man screamed miserably on the Ferris wheel. His spirit finally collapsed in the piercing pain. He was sweating profusely and said in horror, "It was Erickson." He used his ability to control Chen Banmen's mind. He planned to use her to threaten you and then gradually hunt you. Lin En said solemnly, "Where is Banmen now?" The man trembled and said, In the aquarium in the center of the amusement park." Boom. Lin En smashed his head with a punch, and blood and brain matter splattered everywhere. The next moment, Lin En soared into the sky, riding the raging wind, and headed towards the aquarium. His eyes were so dark and terrifying that even a glance at them would make people shudder. This time, Lin En was really angry. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 148. Going beyond the speed of sound, Lin arrived at the aquarium in the center of the amusement park almost instantly. Even the piercing scream caused by breaking the sound barrier made everyone in the playground cover their ears and scream. The next moment, Lin En fell to the ground from the sky with a bang, and a huge hole of more than 10 meters was instantly exploded on the ground. Lin suddenly raised his head and looked forward. In the aquarium, one person after another seemed to have not seen Lin En appear at all. Their eyes were empty, and there were faint red lights flashing in their eyes. Like a puppet, wandering around the aquarium empty. Half a dream, Lin En suddenly frowned and shouted solemnly. He immediately rushed into the crowd and looked around. And at the next moment, he heard waves of low singing coming from the end of the crowd. In this weird aquarium, the voice was like the elegy of a mermaid in the ocean, poignant and ethereal. Lin recognized that voice immediately. Lin broke through the crowd with a bang, and the next moment, he came to the pool in the center of the aquarium. Lin En's pupils shrank suddenly, and he saw Ban Meng sitting on the seat in the first row with her back to him by the pool, her head lowered, and the sad singing voice came from her mouth. Half a dream, Lin En shouted and was about to step forward. But just as he took a step forward, he suddenly felt a huge fluctuation in the ground beneath his feet. The next moment, sharp thorns exploded straight out of the ground one after another, and Lin immediately fell to the ground with a backflip. His head shot up. I saw a dozen ghost-like figures in black robes slowly emerging from the crowd. They squinted their eyes, showing cold murderous intent and cruel smiles. The next moment, on the huge screen above the aquarium, a sudden flash of snowflakes appeared on the screen, and a man's figure appeared on the screen. He leaned back in his chair, holding a glass of red wine in his hand and looking at Lin with a smile. "Lin, nice to meet you." Lin En stood up slowly, moved his wrists, and said expressionlessly, "Oh, it finally appeared. Are you the ones the Gongsun family plans to use against me?" Erickson shook the wine glass in his hand with a smile and said, "I'm sorry, Lin. There are industry regulations and we cannot reveal the employer's information. But you are right. The Gongsun family paid a lot of money to invite us here. Naturally, we have to help them do something." He said softly, "My name is Erickson, and I am a professional killer of the international killer organization Defender Group, but I still prefer others to call me Puppet Master." Lin said expressionlessly, "Do you think you have the ability to kill me?" Erickson smiled deeply and said, maybe. I always thought that a cruel person like you should not have any weaknesses in his heart, because even I felt deeply how cruel you were when you killed. I shuddered, but later I discovered that you still couldn't completely erase your humanity. Under your cruel appearance, you still have a soft heart." He said softly, "As long as you are human, you will have weaknesses, and as long as you are human, you can be easily controlled by others." Lin En narrowed his eyes instantly and said, "Really? So, you plan to use Half Dream to threaten me?" Erickson smiled and said, "No, I respect you, so I am willing to give you a chance to challenge me openly." He stood up slowly, held the wine glass in his hand, took a sip and said, "So, welcome again, Lin, to my theater. The show starts right away." The screen suddenly went black. Almost at the same time, the dozen or so men in black suddenly raised their heads, their eyes bursting with bright red light. Ice blades suddenly appeared in their hands, and their figures continued to emerge one after another like ghosts. At the same time, Erickson's voice sounded from all directions. "They are my subordinates, they work together tacitly, and each one of them has the power of a Grand Master. When they work together, they can kill the general. So will you be killed by them?" The next moment, Lin suddenly raised his head, and the violent wind roared around him. "I'm not interested in playing with you," Lin shouted, and he suddenly rushed in the direction of Han Meng. But those dozen men in black surrounded him almost instantly. Their figures were as elusive as ghosts. They were disillusioned step by step. The sword blades in their hands were filled with unimaginable light, and they moved toward Lin En in an instant. "Come to kill." "Get away," Lin En yelled, and bright purple light suddenly burst out from his eyes. He waved sharply. In an instant, the surrounding gravity increased 1,000 times. At the same time, a flash of lightning flashed across the sky. There was a loud click. At the moment when the dozen men in black were bound by gravity, the lightning falling from the sky fell on them with great precision, directly piercing their bodies. Instant kill. More than a dozen powerful men at the peak of Grand Masters were instantly killed at the mere moment of contact. On the other side, Ling Tian's expression changed drastically when he saw the scene through the screen. He looked at Lin En on the screen gloomily and said, "Unimaginable power, his control over the elements may have reached the pinnacle. Once such a person grows up, I am afraid that no one will be able to stop him in the future." He suddenly turned his head and looked at Ericsson, saying deeply, "Why don't you control him through your ability?" Ericsson looked at the screen, shook the red wine, and said, "Because I want to see his true power." In the aquarium, after killing the dozen men in black in seconds, Lin En immediately flew towards the direction of Banmen. But the next moment, Ericsson's voice sounded again from all directions. "Don't worry, Lin En, the good show has just begun. Doesn't every brave man who wants to save the princess have to go through many difficulties? Your performance surprised me a little. Obviously, appetizers are nothing to you, so don't you think it would be more interesting to start tomorrow's meeting early?" In an instant, Lin En, who was flying, suddenly felt an abnormal fluctuation in the magic power in his chest. It was as if a hand appeared in his chest, a cold hand, and was fiercely grasping his heart. With a click, Lin En directly constructed the will of space and tore the space in front of him. The next moment, Lin En suddenly raised his head and saw a woman dressed in red slowly walked out from the other side of the venue. Her eyes were empty, and the most eye-catching thing was her hand. That translucent hand that seemed to be nothingness. But at this moment, that hand was bleeding blood. Hong Ling, one of the top 100 supernovas, and one of the strongest competitors for the top 5 supernovas this time, her hands can penetrate the void. Her famous move is the terrible ability to directly crush the opponent's heart across the endless space. And the next moment, Lin En suddenly felt a series of air-breaking sounds coming from the sky. Buzz. The next moment, a sword rang. Hundreds of flying swords suddenly attacked him from all directions. Those flying swords instantly split into two into four, and in the blink of an eye, a rain of swords filled the sky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 149. Lin En suddenly raised his head, and a dazzling purple light burst out of his eyes. At the moment when the flying swords in the sky attacked, he stretched out his hand to the sky, and then clenched it suddenly. The will of rules of explosion. The flying swords in the sky suddenly exploded one after another, and the whole sky was shrouded in a huge roar. The next moment, the countless flying swords gathered into a sword blade and flew to the other side of the venue. On the other side of the venue, a man in a white robe slowly walked out. His long hair fluttered, but his eyes were also extremely empty. The sword with gaps appeared slowly and floated behind him. Dei. Lin En recognized the man instantly. The young man who was suspected to have walked out of the ancient land brought the legendary ancient Chinese cultivation system to Taoism. He was also a strong contender for the top 5 of the top 100 supernovas. And the next moment, Lin En slowly turned his head. A young man with a giant sword on his back and dark magic patterns engraved all over his body walked out step by step. His eyes were empty and he held the giant sword behind his back. Every step he took, the ground around him was constantly decaying and corrupting. Kangming. Lin En also knew him. He was the pride of Kangming City in the west and the most favorable competitor for the top 100 supernovas. And then, one after another, young people with shining voices and powerful auras appeared in the aquarium from all directions. 99 people. 99 supernovas. Their eyes were empty, and there were faint red rays in their eyes. Obviously, they had already been controlled. Ericsson's voice with a smile came from all directions. Lin En, aren't you the first among the top 100 supernovas? But I really want to know whether your first place is worthy of the name, and whether you can withstand their challenges and still stand firm. I really see that there is a lot of difference between you. He hadn't finished speaking yet. Lin En had already rushed towards the 99 supernovas with an expressionless face. In an instant, the sky was covered with dark clouds and thunder roared. In an instant, the earth rumbled and trembled violently. His left hand was burning with blazing flames, his right hand was wrapped in biting frost, and the wind was whirring around him. Even the space was constantly showing tiny cracks. Just a moment of contact, the 99 supernovas fell in pieces under Lin An's surging elements like cutting melons and vegetables. Like a river bursting out of a dam, it swept everything with an unstoppable momentum and a devastating force. 20. 50. 90. There was no suspense at all. As soon as they came into contact, they were instantly crushed by Lin An's powerful force. It only took 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, all 99 supernovas fell to the ground. Even after Lin An crushed the 19 supernovas, Erickson had just finished speaking. Instantly, the whole audience was silent. Behind the screen, the smile on Erickson's face froze in place. Ling Tian even trembled and retreated step by step. There was no suspense at all. The 99 supernovas were defeated in a crushing manner. They were not at the same level as him. And the next moment after crushing the 99 supernovas, Lin An came to Ban Meng, who was still sitting there. Lin An suddenly grabbed her shoulders, looked into her empty eyes, and said, "You are controlled." Erickson stood up suddenly, and the smile on his face instantly withdrew. He said gloomily, "Ban Meng, kill him." The next moment, Ban Meng slowly raised his head, and a trace of red light flashed in his eyes. Almost in an instant, Ban Meng's figure disappeared in front of Lin An like a silhouette. Lin An suddenly turned his head and looked solemnly at the other side of the aquarium. I saw Ban Meng standing on the calm water, lowering her eyes, her left hand slowly emerged an ice blade, and her right hand flashed with dazzling space power. The most worrying thing still happened. After seeing the top 100 supernovas, Lin An understood everything. That man had some ability to control people's hearts. He controlled the top 100 supernovas to kill himself, and even Ban Meng was controlled by him before. Otherwise, with Ban Meng's ability, if she wanted to leave, who could let her stay? Erickson said deeply, "Lin En, I really don't want to go to this step, but now it seems that I underestimated you too much." Lin En said solemnly, "You want to use Ban Meng to deal with me?" Erickson narrowed his eyes and said, "Yes, I just want to see, when facing the woman you love, can you also be decisive and kill, can you also kill her with a sword without caring?" Lin En fell into silence. He looked at Ban Meng standing on the water with her eyes downcast. His mind kept reappearing the look of relief she had when she curled up beside him the night before. Why is it so difficult to find someone you can rely on? Lin An's eyes appeared in front of him, those eyes that made him feel heartbroken. Erickson said deeply, "You can't do it, Lin, this is your weakness, you can kill anyone without emotion, because you don't treat them as human beings, but in your cruel heart, you still retain your most ridiculous feelings as a human being. You will kill everyone you think doesn't matter, but you will also fight to protect those you care about. And this is your greatest weakness." The strong wind blew through Lin's hair. He slowly raised his head, and traces of ferociousness gradually flashed through his eyes. And in the deepest part of the ferocious place, a faint, collapsing black light surged slowly like a dormant poisonous snake. In this vast silence, Lin's voice sounded. "You are wrong." The moment he said those words, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and was held in his hand. Lin raised his head suddenly, a dark light flashing in his eyes. "She's not the person I care about most." And the moment he said those words, just as Erickson's face changed drastically, Lin's body jumped up high, and the thunder and lightning in his hand turned into an electric blade, and with the force of thunder, he instantly moved towards the half. The dream stabs away. At that moment, the whole world seemed to be silent. In the endless silence, Ban Meng slowly raised her head, the red light in her eyes flashed violently, and 2 lines of clear tears flowed down her cheeks. The sword blade flashing with lightning was enlarging in her eyes inch by inch. Why is it so difficult to find someone you can rely on? Boom! The violent lightning exploded in the entire aquarium in an instant, and the billowing dust spread toward the sky, covering the entire amusement park. The terrifying roar could be heard clearly even hundreds of miles away. In the sky, dark clouds were majestic, and terrible thunder and lightning kept flashing across, as if the sky was really angry. What no one noticed was that in the boundless dark clouds, on all sides of Jiangdu, the scarlet swarms of insects were overwhelming, as if with the power to sweep everything, they slowly surrounded the entire Jiangdu from all directions. Crackling. The screen in front of Ericsson exploded instantly. Ericsson suddenly raised his head, frowned and said, "My control of the half-dream induction was interrupted. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 150. Ling Tian's face changed, and he said, "Did he really kill Chen Banmen?" Ericsson said deeply, "I don't know. There are only 2 possibilities for the interruption of induction. Either the puppet died, or the puppet forcibly broke free from control. But no matter which one it is not good news for us." Ling Tian trembled and said, "Devil! What a terrible demon! He can even kill the people he cares about the most. What else in this world can stop him?" Ericsson said deeply, "We must leave immediately. If he finds us here, we may both be in danger of our lives." Ling Tian trembled and said, "Didn't you control more than a dozen town commanders of the Gongsun family?" Ericsson narrowed his eyes and said, "I have ordered them to rush to the aquarium. Whether they can strangle Lin En depends on this step." But the next moment after he finished speaking, suddenly, a sharp buzzing sound came from afar. Almost the next moment, the bloody swarm of insects instantly devoured half of the high-rise building where they were. Ericsson and Ling Tian's faces changed. Insect swarm. This is impossible. How did they find us? The next moment, the crazy insect swarm rushed towards them. Ling Tian trembled and said, "What should we do? What should we do?" Ericsson turned his head suddenly and looked into his eyes, saying deeply, "I still have a reason to live, Mr. Ling Tian, I'll trouble you here." Ling Tian immediately realized something, and a huge fear flashed in his eyes, but it was too late. Those eyes seemed to have infinite magic. The moment he met his gaze, Ling Tian felt that his soul was uncontrollably occupied by that power. "No! No!" The shrill scream from the depths of his soul was soon completely drowned by the long bloody stream. In the aquarium. In the rolling dust. Lin En held the girl's face with his hand, resting his forehead against hers, and whispered, it's okay, don't cry, you're not a child anymore, you shouldn't cry anymore." The tears on Ban Meng's face almost wet his entire palm. Ban Meng bit her lips, her purple eyes were red, and tears still couldn't stop flowing from her eyes. "I'm sorry, I've caused you trouble," she choked. Lin En said softly, "What's the big deal, there is no trouble in this world that I can't solve." "Is what you said just now true?" Ban Meng's eyes trembled as she looked at his eyes. The 2 pairs of purple eyes were in such close contact for the first time. The words just now were like a blade, as if they pierced her soul in an instant. The severe pain seemed to tear her whole body apart, spreading continuously, spreading throughout her body. Even her entire spirit almost collapsed at that moment. Lin En said softly, "I'm lying. If I didn't say that, how could you wake up?" Ban Meng trembled and said, "Really?" Lin En nodded, pinched her face, showing 2 rows of white teeth, and said, "Just now I heard Ericsson's order to you. He wanted you to kill me, but you distanced yourself from me. At that time, I knew that his control over you was not as strong as he thought, so I thought, maybe I could find some words to stimulate you, and you might wake up. In an instant, tears burst out of Ban Meng's eyes. She suddenly buried her head in his chest, sobbing, and her hands pierced into Lin An's shoulders tightly. Then there is no need to say such hurtful words. I have tried very hard to get close to you. I just want to occupy a little place in your heart. Just a little bit is enough. It's just a small luxury. I am not greedy for anything. If I give my heart to you and it is broken, I will definitely not be able to bear it. It will be more painful than killing me. So, I will never be betrayed. Lin An hugged her head and said softly, I know, I will never do it again in the future, I swear. Ban Meng raised her tearful eyes and looked at him with sobs. Tears fell from her eyes like pearls. Lin An couldn't help but hold her face and left a kiss on her red lips. He reached out and wiped the tears from her face, and said softly, Is it okay now? Ban Meng wiped the tears from her eyes and said, Yes. Lin An smiled and said, Okay, don't cry, smile, only children cry. Amidst her tears, Ban Meng's face bloomed with a smile. The smile at that moment seemed to be the most beautiful scenery in the world. The satisfied smile blooming in the tears seemed to make the world pale. It was really like what she said, she just had a little extravagant wish. As long as that little extravagant wish could be realized, she would be very satisfied. Because she knew she might die at any time since she was born, so as long as she could live one more day, she felt that it was a gift from God to her. She never thought that she could greet the sunrise of the next day like a normal girl, because every time she closed her eyes, whether she could wake up or not was left to fate. And the appearance of Lin An gave her a chance to become a normal girl. It also gave her a chance to sleep peacefully. In the past 10 years, the most reassuring day for her was that night. She curled up beside Lin An, like a child, hugged his arms and fell asleep peacefully. Because she believed that she would wake up the next day and see the sun rise. Why is it so difficult to find someone to rely on? No, it's not difficult, because I have found it. At this moment, there were bursts of air-breaking sounds in the distance, and the next moment, a dozen vague figures appeared in the endless dust. Ban Meng suddenly raised his head and said, Lin An. Lin An nodded slightly, he stood up slowly, and the wind blew his hair. My insect swarm has arrived, Ban Meng, you are very weak now, there is no need to participate in this war, leave them to me. Lin An slowly walked out of the dust, and countless scarlet insect swarms fell from the sky and circled around him. Lin An suddenly stretched out his hand, and in the wind, a lightning bolt fell from the sky and turned into a thunder blade in his hand. Endless dust slowly dissipated. 10 junior town generals with empty eyes suddenly raised their heads and looked at Lin An grimly, their blood boiling instantly. Lin An said softly, I am very angry, so everyone must die today. No one can leave the city alive before I kill you all. The next moment, Lin An suddenly raised his head, and cruel purple light burst out from his eyes. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us, we will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding.